Shalom. This is Ron Warren with the Nuggets of the Torah. This week's teaching is the 10th parsha of Exodus and is called Vayakhel. In Exodus chapter 35, verses 1 and 2, it reads, "For 6 days work must be done, but in the 7th day you will have a holy day, a Sabbath of complete rest to the Lord. Whoever does any work on it shall be put to death." Now, many in the churches today point out that out of all of the commandments, the Sabbath is the only one not repeated in the New Testament, which is also known as the Brit Hadashah. Therefore, it's not important that it be observed. Is this true? The designations of Old Testament and New Testament are the fruit of replacement theology created by the early church. This teaching error says that God has abandoned Israel and replaced her with a new spiritual Israel. And they believe that the scriptures of Israel were considered antique or old, and while the new scriptures of the church were received as the Bible of the new Israel. It is through this theology that the Roman Catholic Church changed the worship of the seventh-day Sabbath to Sunday, the Christian Sabbath. And this was done in the Council of Laodicea in 364 CE. There's a slogan that is used in this teaching, and it says, "The new is in the old contained, the old is by the new explained." Now, if this is accepted as true, that would mean that before the New Testament was canonized, no one would be able to explain the Old Testament, and this is just not the case. It's also not uncommon to hear the teaching that, as believers in the Messiah, the New Testament is the only scriptures we obey. If you believe this and follow this statement, you have created a very dangerous problem. And this is why. It's stating that the only commandments in the New Testament are acceptable. The other ones are not. And this forces a number of questions. And allow me to deal with just 2 of them. Question number 1. According to the New Testament, can you sell your daughter into prostitution? Yes. Why? Because you're not going to find it listed in the New Testament. But you will find it in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 29, which reads, "Do not proselytize thy daughter and cause her to be a whore, lest the land fall into whoredom and the land become full of wickedness." Question number 2. According to the New Testament, can you use your sexuality to make love to a cow? Yes. Why? Because it's not listed in the New Testament. But it is found in Leviticus chapter 18, verse 23, which reads, "Neither shalt thou lie with any beast and defile thyself therein, neither shall any woman stand before a beast and lie down thereto. It is confusion." If anyone should be observing the Sabbath, which is the 7th day of rest and a worship period, it should be the believers in the Messiah, Yeshua. Hebrews chapter 4 teaches its importance. It is impossible to comprehend the Sabbath significance apart from the atoning work of the Messiah. When God instructed the Israelites to cease from their labors on the tabernacle, he was teaching his people several vital principles. First, he was teaching them, and you, as a kingdom priest, the importance of knowing what the Sabbath is all about and giving it the rightful place in your life. Second, he was teaching them, and you, as a kingdom priest, about the importance of not forgetting the basics of your life as a believer. It was so easy for Israel to become so engrossed in the building of the tabernacle that they would forget to think about God and worship him. And this is the same with you today. You can be so caught up with serving him that you forget the basics of what it means to have life in him and to worship him. Your faith is tied to history. As mentioned before, the New Testament has no commandment dealing with worship time, but people seem to forget that on the so-called Old Testament was the very Bible used by the apostles in the preachings of the gospel. And these Hebrew scriptures were the means by which all true believers came to faith in the centuries before the apostles. In fact, the teachings of the apostles cannot be understood apart from these Hebrew scriptures. And here's the point. The Bible used by those who wrote the New Testament were the people who followed the books of the Old Testament. And the Old Testament does teach a specific time that is set aside to remember our relationship in the Messiah. And that's the seventh-day Sabbath. You know, there's a prophecy that will be fulfilled when Yeshua comes back. And it's written in Isaiah chapter 66, verse 22. And it reads this. And it will be from one new moon to one new moon, and from one Sabbath to a Sabbath, all flesh will come and give worship before me, says the Lord. Now this forces a question. If the Old Testament says that the Sabbath exists, and this prophecy says it will exist when Yeshua comes back, who changed the middle? Shalom. Until next week's episode of the Nuggets of the Torah.